Hello and welcome to another sound design tutorial on Sky River Sound. My name is James Thatcher, and today we're going to talk about different ways to add character and personality to your sounds using Softube Modular. These tips will be helpful whether you are a composer or music producer looking for unique sounds to use in a song, or if you're a sound designer working in games or film. We all know how fast bland sound can be a real buzzkill for our audience. Modular is an incredibly flexible system that gives us plenty of opportunity to create something that hasn't been heard before. You can use most of these tips even if you're not wanting a synth sound. Modular has an effects plugin that can be used to process any incoming audio. Let's jump in and explore what we can do. Now, what I'm going to start with is just this simple sound that could be used as a layer for a laser gun. Now, as you'll hear, it needs some love if it's going to stand out. I made this with just one oscillator, and I'm modulating its pitch with an envelope. If you're not sure what I mean when I say that I'm modulating pitch, or you're not sure how this patch is set up as you look at it, then be sure to tune in for future tutorials where I'll be going over some of the modular basics. Now, the first tool that we're going to talk about today is Distortion. Distortion helps draw attention to our sounds by adding harmonics, telling the part of our brain in charge of hearing that these sounds are important. Distortion can have a really big impact on the perceived timbre of our sound, and it can be used either very subtly or you can crank it all the way to 11 and just destroy whatever you started with. Modular may only have 2 dedicated distortion units, but the people at Softube have modeled all the other units so well that you can get plenty of distortion possibilities with them. So if I were to add, our dedicated distortion units are this one from IntelliGel, and then we've also got the saturation knob from Softube. But you can also overdrive either of these filters, the low pass gate, or also use the tube delay to get a really interesting distortion sound. I'm going to show you a couple of those here. So let's go ahead and add the IntelliGel unit in, and we'll just patch it in now. Let's listen to it before we adjust any settings. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this stages switch and switch it to only 2 stages of wavefolding distortion. Let's turn the number of folds down and maybe play with the symmetry a little. Hear what we've got. Lots of possibilities with this little unit, and because we're using modular and not just a distortion plugin, what we can do is we could add any number of different sources to modulate these. We can modulate the number of folds, we can modulate the symmetry. We could do it with an envelope, for example. Use the same envelope that's controlling the pitch just to keep things simple, and we'll have it control the symmetry. Not exactly what we want, but you get the idea. Let me show you one of my other favorite distortions. That's the tube delay. And what we're going to do is we're going to set this all the way to dry because we're not going to use the delay yet. And then we're going to use the overdrive or the drive knob here to add in some modeled tube distortion. We can even use the little EQ that's in here. Let's add some more high end. Okay, another great tool that we've got, while we've got the delay pulled up, let's go ahead and pull up the mix knob back up to 50%. Add some more drive, and I'm pulling the feedback back a little bit, and I've turned off sync because we don't really need it syncing to our tempo if we're doing just a laser gun. Let's shorten the delay time and hear what just a little bit of delay does. Hear how that makes it already more interesting, gives it a sense of space as well. We can pull the drive back. And let's hear it. Again, we've got plenty of controls here that we can modulate with our virtual control voltages. Similar to delay, another great tool that Modular has for making our sounds more interesting is reverb. We have both the Tsar 1 reverb. If you've bought that expansion, it is well worth it. It's a gorgeous sounding digital reverb. You can make very realistic spaces, or you can also emulate some more vintage digital reverb sounds with it. And then there's also their spring reverb, which is another great expansion for it. So let's add the Tsar 1. Patch it in, and because it's a stereo reverb, even though we're only sending a left signal in, we're going to get a left and right out. I'm going to shorten the reverb time and make the density a little more sparse. We can have it, keep it bright sounding, take off some of the roll off. And let's hear what we've got. That's with it all the way wet. We can take it down a little bit. Pull the time down even more. Hear how that helps your ear find it in space a little better? There are plenty of things that we can play with in this reverb. We can set it to where it's mostly the early reflections, make the early reflections larger. We can give it less diffusion or more. Give it some different modulation. Right now it's in random. Let's hear it if we give it fast modulation. We can even modulate our reverb time and get some really interesting results. I'm going to use the same envelope that I'm using to modulate the pitch, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this CV mix to kind of dial back the envelope a little bit so that it's not massively affecting the time, or so that we have some more control over the time without having to affect the pitch modulation as well. All right, let's hear it as is. And because the envelope is so short, it's not making a huge difference. Let's try and cranking this up a little. Hear how that's a little different versus if we unplug it here? Now, if we used a longer envelope, you would hear even more of a difference. Okay, there we have it. A few more ways that we can make our laser sounds more interesting using distortion, delay, and reverb in Modular. Now, in future videos, what I'll do is I'll show you how we can use more advanced features, such as adding different oscillators, using FM and sync, or also using some of the add-in modules from mutable instruments like braids and clouds to be able to make our laser sounds more interesting. I'll also in future videos be covering modular basics for those of you who haven't gotten into modular synthesis yet. And next week we'll be getting back to sound design of monsters in Shale. If you want more sound design tips, or if you want practical and actionable answers to your questions about working in game audio, I'd really encourage you to check out Akash Thakar's channel. I'm putting a link to his channel in the description. Go ahead and subscribe now. Do yourself a favor. You can thank me later for that. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next week.